Hi, my dear Astro family. Today we are going to be looking at the weekly forecast starting on 9th of August until 15th of August. This is going to be truly a super busy week. We have got planets off the leash. Mercury is going to be the star of the week, surely, because it's going to be meeting all outer planets as well as Venus and Jupiter. But also Mars is being quite busy as well, but Mars is going to become way busier the following week, so that will be interesting. We have got the solar eclipse happening this week as well, which I would like to mention that I will not be covering in this video. Because on Monday, I'm going to be recording a live session for my Patreons. The Patreon is available on my website, AstroViktor.com, as well as it is available on YouTube as a special perk. So if you want to join that class, then feel free. It's going to take place on Monday. I think it's 2 p.m. Budapest, Hungary time, so check it out. So truly a busy week, and we might be doing this week in two parts because we have got Ceres moving into the sign of Cancer, and that's going to be very important because Ceres will be spending 9 months there due to its retrogression. And also Pallas Athene is going retrograde this week as well. So we've got a lot to cover. Let's get going. And at the end of the video, I will be showing you the chart as well so that we can do a bit of a recap on that. First up is on 9th of August, Mars is on 29 degree of Gemini, and it makes a trine to North Node in Aquarius, as well as a sextile to South Node, of course. So Mars is on a critical degree, right? And it is kind of like creating that bridge with the lunar nodes, right? The 29 degree is considered as an energetic degree. It always carries a sense of urgency, finality, or kind of like a decisive momentum, especially in the sign of Gemini, which represents decision making. Now, this is surely a mental drive, right? So we have to make a final decision. We have to have a crucial conversations, kind of like a last minute breakthrough as well. But Mars is harmonizing with the North Node in Aquarius, as well as the South Node in the sign of Leo. So the actions we take right now push you directly towards a future focused growth while letting go of past ego struggles and the need for drama, right? So imagine that, I don't know, you are ready to kind of send the final version of a email, a contract, launching a pitch, for example, or having that decisive talk you have been putting off, for example, with your partner, if it happens in your 7th house. The words chosen now carry weight and kind of like setting a long-term momentum as well. However, what we need to be paying attention to is that we have to be choosing strategy over ego, right? Because often the South and the sign of Leo is kind of like, I want to win this argument. And it's a sextile, so maybe this is a realization that having argument with someone isn't as valuable as building kind of like a collaboration, coming to an agreement that secures something connected to your future vision, which is of course North Node in the sign of Aquarius, right? It is also about clearing a bottleneck of kind of like this back and forth type of communication when it comes to a group project, for example, or with your friends, with community. And then finally, we have got the closure, right? And then we are able to move forward. We are able to kind of like create a better futuristic scenario. Of course, this is not preventing you from speaking your truth, right? It is about making that call. It is about locking in a decision. And somehow there is a reminder as well not to waste energy on kind of like who gets the spotlight, right? Focus on what actually moves you towards the future. It's a conversation typically that we are having to have that is creating a win-win scenario for everyone. Now, on the same day, Mars is moving into the sign of Cancer. So Mars was finalizing, for example, a business endeavor, right, in the sign of Gemini, or it was having this final conversation with someone. And Mars was quite fast in the sign of Gemini, actually. There was a lot of headspace there, but then now Mars is diving into this emotional, intuitive sign, which is Cancer. And Mars is kind of like not necessarily thinking anymore. It is still thinking, of course, but it's going to start communicating a little bit more about how to protect our foundation, how we feel. That's going to be one of the topics that Mars wants to kind of like communicate about. Of course, it's a fall position of Mars, which means that Mars feels like it's in a prison in the sign of Cancer. I mean, imagine that the soldier has to be chasing chickens in the kitchen, right? That's kind of like the picture I usually paint with Mars in the sign of Cancer. So it's a little bit difficult because obviously Mars would like to be on the battlefield, but it's the realization that we have to be kind of like protecting our base before we actually go on that battlefield. So in the sign of Gemini, Mars was doing a lot of brainstorming and then it came up with a scenario. Now, Mars has to realize that I'm ready or I should be ready to build the fort, right? So I'm going to stop debating ideas, which was the Gemini and the trine to the North Node. And I'm going to start physically protecting my base, my home environment, and I'm going to be setting very firm emotional boundaries. I'm going to be pouring my energy into family, into my personal security as well. Now, Mars becomes a little bit more intuitive in the sign of Cancer, right? So, in the sign of Gemini, it was analyzing pros and cons. And then now it is going to start asking, does it feel safe? What do my guts tell me? How does it feel in my guts to move towards this new territory? And if something threatens my peace, Mars in Cancer gives you the drive to defend it, especially if someone is kind of like, let's say, threatening your children. It's a little bit of a mama tiger type of archetype here, right? Now, Mars in the sign of Gemini was a little bit more of a teamwork orientated energy. But it wanted to kind of create a supportive work environment, for example, right? But now this Mars is kind of ready to sit down and then knit a little bit with family members and kind of like having that cozy environment. But like I said, it is a very frustrating position for Mars because it prefers being on the battlefield. So, but of course, we are slowing down that fast talk as well. And then it's more of an intentional protection type of archetype. It's kind of like I'm guarding my next move. I'm going to be directing my drive toward what makes me feel secure. Now, it's very interesting actually that Mercury also enters the sign of Leo and on the very same day, on the 9th, and Mercury is going to be reactivating that cradle composition of the outer planets. So therefore, Mercury is going to try Neptune, opposing Pluto, and sextiling Uranus as well. So that's really interesting, of course. Those two planetary energies are happening on this very same day. But when it comes to Mercury in the sign of Leo, this is a lot of story there. There's a lot of teaching happening with it as well, or we put up a show, or it's super brilliant for creativity, creative writing especially, or when it comes to coming up with creative solutions to a problem. However, the negative side of that is that we can blow something out of the ballpark. We can make it way bigger than it should be. So this is a combination of exaggeration, or when it comes to our opinions, we can get super stubborn about it, or we just want to be impressing someone. We just want to be in the center of attention, and then therefore we are going to be giving a lot of stories to others, and we want to be admired. But is there listening to that as well? However, Mercury in Leo is also about talking up with having a heartfelt conversation and speaking your truth with a lot of bravery, with a lot of courage. So that's super good for it. Now, like I said, Mercury is going to be activating the outer planets, and it's going to be making a trine to Neptune. So therefore, if because we have got an idea there, and then we want to go for it. So with Neptune, which is the planet of vision, let's say we are ready to write a script, for example, we are ready to present our vision with a lot of passion, a lot of inspiration as well. However, Neptune says it's not just about the facts. We are kind of like having to paint this compelling picture. We're going to have to be able to kind of move people. We're going to have to make people fall in love with this idea, right? So this is definitely about creative solutions to problems. Sometimes that logic cannot alone fix. It's about trusting your creative instincts. Mercury and Neptune together says that we don't need to be having a set of rules. We don't have to follow a step-by-step kind of like guide. We just need to be trusting our intuitions which way to go, right? This is about trusting your big vision and then having that imagination. And then I'm going to be sharing my imagination with others with a lot of confidence. Now, Mercury is opposing Pluto at the same time, so we do have got reality check there. This is having to have a very tough conversation, or having to negotiate something, or I'm trying to pitch this idea to someone, and then all of a sudden, the person is asking us probing questions. We get into a debate where those power dynamics kind of like come to light, or a piece of information can come to light, right? And then, of course, Mercury in Leo is going to demand control, right? But we are going to be pushing back on that feedback that we might get. So the negative side of this is that we can go down kind of like this ego-driven road as well. This could also indicate that you are finding a hidden piece of information that is going to kind of stir up your soul a little bit, right? So you might want to be having a heartfelt kind of like conversation with someone, or just a light-hearted conversation with someone, and then all of a sudden it turns to become like it becomes too serious, or it's about figuring out the true motives of someone, or figuring out the hidden costs of a project, the hidden costs of that story that we have told someone, and so forth. I mean, this is potentially a aspect configuration where we could be finding missing information in businesses, business deals, or yeah, I tend to call Mercury and Pluto aspect as a bit of a Sherlock Holmes. So we are investigating something here, and surely with Mercury in the sign of Leo, an investigation is going to become successful because something is going to come to light. We had the vision with Neptune, right? So the Pluto can also indicate that we have to be reworking our pitch, our vision a little bit. We have to be testing that against harsh reality, or Pluto in Aquarius can represent the feedback coming from, like internet, or a friend of yours, and so forth. And then we're going to have to work things a little bit around as well. Again, the reminder here is that we shouldn't allow the ego to turn a debate into kind of like a power struggle. This is an invitation of accepting other people's viewpoint, as well as kind of like having a look at whether there is truth in it, and then how I can alter something that I'm trying to create, right? Because Leo is the sign of creation. Thank God Mercury is going to be making a sextile to Uranus. So that's an aha moment there. So we've got that unexpected solution, we've got that alternative route, and it pops up right when you thought you were stuck, and then you find your ways out of this kind of like chaotic Plutonian moment. Also, there could be a lot of emails popping up. A new piece of information could come to your way, which is going to be changing the way you think about that creative project. Or it could be forcing you to think on your feet very quickly, and you have to be adapting to something kind of like instantly. Uh, However, this is a brilliant aspect to go online and then to share what is truly kind of like in your heart. So, of course, at the same time, by the way, we have got Venus making these aspects as well, but we spoke about them last week. So I'm not going to be talking about Venus today. With Mercury and Pluto opposition, it also can represent super intense thoughts, but also you can have these awakening moments as well, because Mercury and Pluto is kind of like the penetrating insights, the penetrating conversations. It's a conversation that exposes something or makes you realize that there are some psychological blockages there that we are meant to be overcoming. So this is the aspect of research, investigation, psychological kind of like readings that we can be doing. But also, Mercury and Pluto is super good to come up with a strategy, like I said before. So, we can get super obsessed with this as well, or we can get super suspicious. So we can think, oh, what is my partner doing? Why did this person try to talk to me? And so forth. Or you can even feel like that someone is trying to pressurize you into doing something that is not your heart desire. Mercury in the sign of Leo. So, of course, Mercury in Leo is going to be proud of something that it wants to create. So, it's going to push back on Pluto, especially if Pluto is coming on too intensely, which, of course, Pluto has got the tendency to do so. With that Mercury and Neptune, it's about dreaming. It's about kind of like seeing synchronicities, or maybe you have got a dream, for example, and then you are trying to decode the symbolism behind that. But it's also super good to write music, listen to music, doing a lot of meditation as well, so that you can really kind of like open up your heart chakra. Or it's super good to have a spiritual guidance session with someone. So if you need a reading, go ahead, and then we can potentially try to choose that day to decode what is happening in your life right now. It really feels like with Mercury, Pluto, and Mercury, Neptune, it's really about discovering these emotional undercurrents that are holding you back from reaching a better future. And you're going to have to kind of like think about that. And, Mercury, Uranus really supports the brainstorming elements of it, or so therefore we can sit down with the friends and we can talk things through, or you can sit down with your therapist and you can have that breakthrough moment. Mercury Uranus is really an astrology or an astrologer type of combination. So therefore it's super good to have a reading with someone around this time. And we might be just having kind of like a unconventional conversation, um, and maybe it's a bit casual, maybe it's a bit friendly, but somehow you are able to open up, which is often the first step for healing, right? So now that's the very first kind of like big aspect configuration that is happening. By the way, I mentioned that Mars is moving into the sign of Cancer. I forgot to give you the date, but that's happening on the 11th of August, and Mars will remain in the sign of Cancer until 27th of September. What you might want to be watching out with that is that, Cancer is very emotional. So our actions can be driven by our moods as well as by our emotions. And of course, thank God, Mars last aspect is something to do with the North Node. So Mars still knows that in order for me to reach a future goal, I'm going to have to be able to balance out facts with my emotions as well. But this Mars in Cancer can get a bit scared, right? What I mean by that is that pretty much getting scared when it comes to kind of like uncertainty, or whether I'm going to be able to protect my family, or I'm going to be able to put food on the table. But also this aspect is about defense mechanism also, because I'm going to be defending my personal boundaries. It's kind of like I'm putting a security system on the wall so that no one can enter the room, right? Because it's about privacy somehow. Mars energy is not so direct in the sign of Cancer, right? So the actions are a little bit more passive aggressive, and therefore, count to 10 when you feel like you are getting angry or you are getting frustrated and so forth, because Mars in Cancer could really hurt people really kind of like easily, but it doesn't do it on purpose though. Think of Mars as in a kind of like a surgical knife. So the ultimate goal of Mars is to remove um, certain type of wounds, emotional baggages. And this is surely going to be a big topic, because on the 12th of August, on the day of the solar eclipse, which I have also mentioned at the beginning that I'm not going to be talking about that today, we are going to break that down on Monday for all 12 signs on my special YouTube membership, or you can do that on my website as well. But Mars on the 12th is making a sextile to Chiron in the sign of Taurus. Of course, that's going to be super important here, right? Because this is an action to be able to remove these emotional baggages. This is an action being taken towards removing, for example, financial blockages in our life, right? So it really tells you that it's not just about thinking or talking your way through your vulnerability right now. It is about taking protective action, which is Mars in Cancer, to create the opportunity. And that's sextile. Sextile doesn't come naturally. It's about creating an opportunity to heal the wound, to kind of fix the weak spots in our life. And that's Chiron. It's obviously Taurus and Chiron are really about safety. Cancer is more to do with emotional safety, while Taurus is more to do with physical safety. So it feels like you're trying to find ways of securing both of them in your life. It's very much about potentially that you're going to be ready to put your foot down and then say no, for example, to a demanding parent, a client, or you're ready to kind of like cut out exhausting family dynamics, and because you want to protect your peace, right? That's Mars in Cancer. It kind of means that you have to be reliving that long-standing point of stress and burnout that is kind of like Chiron causing here right now. It's about some type of vulnerability that is nagging you, something that you have been avoiding. Most likely, it is super connected to foundations, because Taurus and Cancer together is also about foundation as well. Even it could talk to you about addressing a physical health concern, for example, or you're ready to seek your financial base. So you're ready to kind of like pay off your mortgage or secure a loan so that you don't have to pay the rent anymore, and so forth. Also, Chiron is a mentor archetype as well. So this could even talk to you again about having a healing conversation with a mentor of yours, or Mars is the pioneer. And Chiron is the wounded, the disadvantaged. So you can become an advocate for someone else, let's say on your team, for example, who is going through a difficult patch in their lives. And maybe you are using your own past scars or experiences to kind of make others feel secure or supported, or you are telling others your story, kind of like how you got out of a very similar scenario. So that Mars is, of course, I think it's very important this week. Of course, this is happening on 0 degree of Cancer to 0 degree of Taurus. So therefore, this is going to be pretty important here. Now, there is definitely a lot of talk happening this week, right? Why is that? Because Mercury is definitely the busiest planet this week. So Mercury ran into Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and on the 13th, Mercury is actually making a sextile to Venus in Libra as well. And this is quite a nice, smooth, this is a bit of a togetherness. So we sit down with our partner, we talk about, or I sit down with my children and then we talk about things, right? Mercury in Leo is a bit dramatic. It's very expressive though. But that harmonious sextile with Venus, who is sitting very comfortably in her home sign, the sign of diplomacy and a super relationship focused type of energy. So therefore, it's kind of like Venus is cooling Mercury's dramatic side a little bit down there. It's kind of like we compromise with this aspect, and then if there were certain type of frictions, all of a sudden it starts melting away. It's kind of like words flow with warmth and grace and even charisma as well. And we are coming up with a solution. We find the perfect balance. Yes, we're gonna go and party, for example, Mercury in Leo, or we're gonna stand out confidently, but we are going to be maintaining the peace, the harmony as well. We're gonna be building rapports here. We're gonna find win-win solutions. So if Mercury in Leo is kind of like ready to seal a deal, I mean, especially with Libra configurations right now, with Venus being there, right, which is about cooperation and potentially contractual agreement. So imagine that you are ready to kind of pitch something, like you are ready to make a sales call, right? And then you are ready to negotiate a contract. And this aspect guarantees somehow that both sides feel respected and valued, and both sides feel like that, yeah, we are going to be winning something here. Okay. Or it really could talk to you about reconnecting as well after a misunderstanding, or kind of like the heavy, tricky kind of like conversations that we might have had to have before. And then all of a sudden we are kind of like ready to use a different tone here, a lighter tone, a diplomatic tone. And we might even give each other constructive criticism, but we welcome them and we are ready to kind of work through them. You can actually really do a lot of creative collaboration and branding with this as well. So if you want to do a promotional campaign, for example, or you want to be designing, I don't know, visual content, then this is the aspect that you can really use for that. Surely this is super good for networking. So you can reach out to key contacts of yours, offering something to them. Therefore, this is super good for contractual agreements also. Or you can, if you are a social media kind of contender, right, then you can really make a community post, uh, because it feels like you would get the support there. So that's the Mercury Venus aspect. And guess what? Mercury after is going to make a conjunction to Jupiter. That's going to be happening on 10 degree of Leo, which is actually the 10th degree of Leo is a Sagittarius dwarf. Now that's happening on August 15th. Okay. And that's also quite a nice aspect to a certain extent. However, the two planets are natural enemies. So I have to mention that as well. What it means is that Mercury doesn't like Jupiter and Jupiter doesn't like Mercury either. But now the planet of mind, message, and strategy meets the planet of expansion, wisdom, and opportunity. So it feels like that Mercury is putting its ego aside and it's ready to listen to Jupiter a little bit, because you have got certain type of wisdom to offer me. But Mercury is there to kind of like provide the details, what it has to be done, and Jupiter is ready to listen here as well. Right? Now, of course, Jupiter has got the upper hand slightly bit just because it's 10 degree of Leo, which is a Sagittarius dwarf. Okay, so it's a bit of an admiration here where Mercury, in order to seal a deal, for example, it's going to put its ego aside and it's going to be smiling in the face of Jupiter, and it's going to be a lot more agreeable. Remember, Mercury and Jupiter do not like each other, right? But all of a sudden, Jupiter is kind of like giving this massive boost of optimism to Mercury, or this high level thinking. And it says, don't just think of local environment, think bigger, right? Jupiter is giving that authority to the voice of Mercury as well. So therefore, small ideas get bigger, vision stretches further, confidence, for example, in your book or in your message, kind of like reaches a peak here, right? This is not necessarily an aspect where we have to be fine-tuning little details. It's more about seeing the grand vision, making bold declarations, being super confident in your abilities as well as in others as well. Of course, there is a danger here. What's the danger? That we can be kind of like giving these grand stories, or we can make a super bold statement, we can be over promising things, we can be talking way too much, too many stories, not enough facts. So yeah, there is a danger here, and we're going to have to be able to find the balance. And I feel like that's why that Mercury and Venus aspect could be super good as well if you use it, because you're going to sit down with a partner of yours, a business partner, a friend of yours, a romantic uh, partner, and so forth. And then we're going to go through the details. So this aspect is super good to launch, to make big announcements, making that major declaration, or you want to be making this high profile type of post, or you want to do campaigning, you want to offer a course, for example. This could be a super good day for that. Also, this is, Leo is about fun. So even this could really talk to you about that you just gather your kids and then we're going to do a bit of a fun weekend, right? So therefore, I'm going to put work, I'm going to put my busy schedule behind me for a day or two, and I'm just going to start enjoying life a little bit. And then we're going to share stories around campfire, and we're going to make the pokies or the marshmallows and all those type of lovely things. So we can really use this aspect configuration for that. So these are basically the major aspects of the week. But now I want to touch base on briefly on some of the asteroids. First up is Ceres. Ceres will enter the sign of Cancer on the 12th of August. And I'm going to be making a separate video about this on Tuesday, because Ceres will spend here 10 months due to its retrogression, okay? So Ceres is the archetype of care, but also resource management. Ceres represents cycles, emotional sustainability. Ceres is food, agricultural type of things. So when Ceres enters Cancer, which by the way, last year I made a separate video about Ceres in Cancer, so you can revisit that if you want to. Because when I was preparing for 2026, I made loads of videos about the year ahead, and one of them was Ceres in the sign of Cancer, right? But Ceres in Cancer is about self-care. how we nourish ourselves, how we protect our resources, how we establish security, kind of like on a foundational level. What's very interesting is that Ceres and Mars made a pact, made a contractual agreement on 28 degree of Gemini, which we spoke about last week. It's a verbal contract, most likely, or it's a written contract. Mars said, okay, I'm going to be protecting your resources, right? And then Ceres promised that I'm going to be taking care, let's say, of your army. So there is certain type of a contractual agreement. The reason why it's important, because Mars goes into the sign of Cancer on the 11th, Ceres follows on the 12th. So they are walking hand in hand, right? And Ceres in Cancer, the problem between those two archetypes, that Ceres in Cancer doesn't care about superficial success. Okay, it wants to audit the kind of like the emotional tank. It wants to just really take care of the family. It wants to create a better home life, a better country. It wants to have better personal boundaries. Mars, though, is really interested in success. So Mars is interested in winning, even in the sign of Cancer. But of course, it could be because I want to win, not only for me but for my family as well, or I want to win because I want to be supporting my family, right? So the motive there is genuine, but still, these two planetary archetypes are not necessarily on the same ground, and that's a bit of a problem. Imagine that, Ceres in the sign of Cancer, it wants to be renegotiating living arrangements. It wants to be updating the household budgets, like how much money we spend on, cleaning products and so forth. And Mars kind of wants to make physical changes to the living space. So Ceres wants to make it more comfortable. Mars wants to make physical changes, or it even wants to make things a bit more modern as well. But Ceres says that the true sanctuary doesn't necessarily come from certain type of upgrades. Now, of course, this could indicate having very honest conversations about shared responsibilities at home or even in close partnerships as well. But Mars, sometimes uses guilt as a weapon against others, or even emotional manipulation in the sign of Cancer. So therefore, it can become a bit more nasty, right? Or Ceres in Cancer is like, I want to be kind of like refilling my emotional tank, right? So what does that mean? Let's say I want to rest. I want to prioritize physical rest. I want to be, eat properly, for example. I want to choose personal comfort over this non-stop kind of like productivity. And Mars in Cancer is like the children are running around in the house and the soldier tries to stop them. Right? Oh, don't cut tomatoes because you're gonna cut your finger, or I don't want you to bleed to death, right? That's Mars in Cancer. So this is still a bit of a depression and a bit of an emotional period where it feels like that I don't have the right to rest. But remember, Mars and Ceres made a verbal promise, a verbal agreement in the sign of Gemini on 28 degree. So one of the challenges here is going to be how you are going to be balancing out the children running around like chicken without heads, and the self-care, the self-protection, the self-care, basically, right? Because it is going to give you that long-term security that you need. And Ceres in Cancer says that you have to be auditing your foundational security. So remember that Ceres will be in the sign of Cancer for approximately about 10 months. So, but we are going to be talking about this more in detail. On the 14th, Pallas Athene goes retrograde on 22 degree of Aries. Now, this is also something I prepared a video about. because Paula Satini is also spending approximately 10 months in the sign of Aries. So it's not 10 months anymore, it's going to be approximately another 5 months or so. It's going to leave the sign of Aries at the end of the year, right? But Paula Satini is the asteroid of strategy, pattern recognition, problem solving, a bit of a mental warfare, really. So Paula Satini is slowing down on 22 degrees. It means that it is ready to make a better plan. It is revisiting the previous plans and it's ready to make changes around that. So it's kind of like slowing down a little bit so that we can rethink how we are going to win. Because Paula Satini is absolutely about winning. It never loses. Okay? And maybe it realizes that my strategies were too aggressive before, or I got into this confrontation kind of like too directly. So now I'm going to put my head back on, that head first kind of like tactical energy, and we're going to turn a little bit inwards. And so we are going to be pausing before kind of like charging into that battle because maybe we don't have enough guns, right? We don't have enough resources to march forward. So we're going to be retracing our business steps, for example, or our campaign strategies, right? I'm not going to be aggressively launching or pushing something. We're gonna sit down and then, ooh, is this plan gonna work, or am I going to face kind of like a deadlock there? So it somehow tells you that we have to be finding strategic, like we have to fix the strategic flaws, something that we missed before we are going to be moving forward. Maybe we are going to be kind of like looking at conflicts and how we dealt with certain type of conflicts and how we dealt with certain type of negotiations as well. So maybe we sent a, kind of like we fired off an angry email, or we got into this power struggle before, and and then you realize that it is draining my energy. I'm tired to fight all the time. It's not only you losing something, but I'm also losing maybe my sanity, my strength, and so forth. So we have got a more deliberate approach to something which potentially yields better results later on. And also on the 12th of August, Juno goes back into the sign of Capricorn from Aquarius. This is also a topic that I made a video about last year. So I'm just going to give you a summary. All those videos are a good 30, 40 minutes long. So I have spoken about those in depth. But, Juno is the asteroid of commitment, contractual agreements, partnership, loyalty. And it was in a very futuristic sign, right? It was a very community-based sign, Aquarius. And then it says, you know what, we launched something, a futuristic moment. People are not ready for it. So let's just go back to this pragmatic, more structured kind of like sign of Capricorn, right? Whether it is a partnership, a business agreement, a legal agreement, your personal relationships, and so forth. But you are going back to basics. You are looking at whether I want to ensure that something is solid and real there before actually we move forward. So this might be about formalizing, legalizing agreements, auditing relationship viabilities, or redefining the roles and the responsibilities. And I'm going to set this very clear kind of like boundaries, or, but I want to get my job description, for example. So what's my task? What's your task? And so on. Capricorn is a financial sign. So this could really talk to us about focusing on financial and long-term security as well. And maybe we're going to sit down and then we are going to be committing to this kind of like a business statement. I call Capricorn as the company statement. And then we can revisit the company statement, and then we can realize that we haven't necessarily kind of like committed to it 100%. So how can we commit to it? Maybe Capricorn is in your sixth house, so you promised yourself that you were going to lose weight, right? And then you haven't reached your goals. So this is your time to kind of like look at why I haven't reached my goals. Were my goals realistic, or maybe I was a little bit on the tender, softy, lazy side. So then I'm going to have to push it even harder. So therefore, Juno goes back into Capricorn is about having better intentions that you had before. So that would be the weekly energy pattern, guys. As you can see, it says we lost connection. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? If someone can drop it in the box, if you can hear me, because it says something is with the connection. Yes, you can hear me. Great. Thank you for the question. Opinion on the Lionsgate portal. Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that, okay? I might upset some people, but I don't believe in the Lionsgate portal, okay? And I'm going to tell you why I don't believe in it. And then you use the information for whatever you want to, okay? So first of all, this Lionsgate portal is a very modern, astrological, kind of like new age stuff that we are celebrating annually. And that is happening on August 8th, okay? Of course, it's an 8/8 day, right? And apparently, this is a very heightened spiritual energy. And this is a kind of like a manifestation portal or a lot of personal awakening. Ancient astrologers, because let's talk about where it came from, okay? So ancient astrologers also kind of like believed in the Lionsgate portal. It wasn't called Lionsgate portal, but where does it come from? Basically, they were watching the Hellaika rising of Sirius. Okay, Sirius is a beautiful star, and typically this was done in ancient Egypt. Sirius is the brightest star in the night sky, and it had this supreme importance because they noticed that when there was the Hellaika rising of Sirius, then the Nile, the river Nile, kind of like flooded. And it basically brought them abundance because, I don't know, they were able to grow vegetables and all those type of stuff, right? So that annual flooding of the Nile, it brought them that fertile soil, and basically it brought the life back to the land. And therefore it was kind of like the start of their new year. And that happened in July, early August, okay? So that's where it kind of comes from on one hand. Of course, this Lion Gate portal falls right in the middle of the Leo season, and Leo is the symbol of a lion, right? So that's where the name comes from. But in esoteric traditions, Sirius is actually often referred to as the spiritual sun archetype. So that's where it comes from, okay? What's the problem with it? The problem with it is that it's a beloved spiritual framework, but astronomically, the exact date of the Helicor rising of Sirius varies depending on your geographic latitude. So, due to that axial precession, Sirius no longer aligns with the Sun on August 8th in the exact way it did, let's say, thousands of years ago. And we still kind of like treating this 8/8 day as it's more of a numerological anchor than kind of like an astronomical event. So, by the way, this Lions Gate portal really comes from the 1990s, okay? We don't necessarily know where it comes from, but I think one of the first person who kind of mentioned it was Ray Mardinks, or somewhere very late 1990s, like 1998 or so. And he was someone who wrote about cosmic alignment and the Mayan calendar, and a lot about stars and so forth. And if I'm not mistaken, he was interpreting a very specific celestial configuration, which took place on August 8th, 1998. So we had 3 8s in it, right? And he was one of these first one who kind of called it as a stargate or a portal, because there was something special happening on the sky. I don't remember what was going on, okay? However, there were already the Lionsgate portal kind of got mentioned a little bit earlier than that, and that as well, but just we don't know where it comes from. Okay? So one of the reasons why I do believe that it doesn't mean anything is because the sun doesn't connect with Sirius anymore. So it depends where you are to start with. It really depends on your latitude. So if you're around the equator, sun aligns with Sirius around July 10th to 21st. If you are in kind of like Egypt, that's going to happen around July 22nd to 26th. If you are in mid-US or even Southern Europe, then it happens around August 8th to August 12th. So yeah, it could be actually something to do with, Lionsgate portal or whatever we want to be calling it. But if you're in Northern US or more the Central Europe, like London or New York or Paris, then it's going to be happening around August 15th to August 22nd. So that's why I wouldn't necessarily call the 8th of August as a Lionsgate portal. Okay, that was really true somewhere around in ancient Egypt around 3000 to 2000 BCE. Okay, so that's my opinion on that. Thank you for asking about it. But I'm very curious to hear if you guys do see the 8th of August as a special day, but for me, it's nothing special about it, to be frank. Then in that case, what I would be watching out for a little bit more, okay, and that is also happening, of course, on the 8th of August. And that's why it used to be a super special day, because Sirius and, the Helicor rising of Sirius happened around the exact same day as the mid-season. So what does it mean? Because on around the 8th of August, the sun is on 15th degree of Leo. And the 15th degree of the fixed signs are really connected to the mid-season of eclipses. Okay, so it means that we are in the middle of the season, we are in the middle of eclipse season, right? And that's true, we are in the middle of the eclipse season. It's just the problem is that the initial thought about it, as in the Helaica rising of one of the most important fixed stars of all, Sirius, is just not happening around 8th of August anymore. So that's why this might not be as special as it used to be. Okay, so that's what I have got to share about Sirius with you. Wow, thanks for this info. Okay, so guys, this is the weekly energy pattern for you. So I will see you on Tuesday because we want to talk about Ceres moving into the sign of Cancer for a good 10, 9, 10 months. So that's going to be pretty important there. So I want to break that down for you. Thank you for being here, and I will see you next time. Have a blessed week. Take care. Bye bye.